This episode of Author Showcase features author Barbara Barnett, who is president of Midwest Writers Association and is a well-known online television critic. Barbara is the author of Chasing Zebras, the unofficial guide to House MD, and is executive and publisher of blogcritics.org. Today she's here to tell us about her new novel, The Apothecary's Curse, set in both present-day Chicago and Victorian London. Sit back and enjoy learning a little bit more about The Apothecary's Curse.
Hi, my name is Barbara Barnett, and I am here to talk with you about my new novel, The Apothecary's Curse, which came out in October from Pyre Books, an imprint of Prometheus. What is it about? It's really fantasy, meets history, meets medicine, meets mythology, meets science, with a little bit of Conan Doyle sprinkled in. Galen Ercildown in 1837, and he's living in a place called Smithfield Market in London, a very poor area. He's cut off all relationships from any of medical society. He was once a favorite in medical society, but it's been a year since he's talked to anyone in the medical community. Simon Bell was one of his acquaintances, more than an acquaintance, although not really ever friends. Simon's wife is dying of cancer of the breast, and he's desperate. He's been to every snake oil salesman and street mountebank to get something to cure his wife of cancer. Nothing. She's in desperate straits. He's even more desperate because he knows he will not survive without her. He pleads with Ercildown. Do you have anything? And Ercildown is known within the medical community as someone who not only fills the prescriptions and instructions of physicians, but often comes up with unique and elaborate cures for things that nobody else can know about. So Simon goes to him and begs him, please, 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 may I do this? And he's reluctant. Eventually, Galen says, fine, I will make this for you. And what he does is he consults this ancient book. What he doesn't tell Simon, because Simon doesn't know that Galen is immortal, is that the cure he's going to create comes out of this book, that his own mistaken use of it made him immortal in the first place. So he makes him this cure very, very carefully. He makes it, he gives it to him, and tells Simon, I'm giving this to you, but please understand, if you do not use it exactly as my instructions tell you to, I'm not responsible for the consequences. So Simon is very ambivalent about the whole thing, and now his wife takes a downturn. He knows she's going to die. He has no choice. He gives her the potion, which he has done some things with because he was curious, and because he was ambivalent. He gives her the potion, and it kills her immediately with all the earmarks of poisoning. Simon is bereft. He's just killed his wife. He wants nothing to do but to take his own life. So what does he do? He takes the rest of the potion, downs it. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Fast forward, there are things that happen to Galen in the interim that I'm not going to go through because they would be spoilers. Fast forward 5 years. Simon realizes after many suicide attempts he cannot die. He's tried it all. Now he's been in a terrible, catastrophic construction accident in the middle of London on the London railway construction. And everyone else is killed. He has not died. Now he's beginning to wonder, what's wrong with me? And at that point, through some certain happenstances, not real happenstances, they make sense and they're logical, he is brought to the attention of a man who is a mad doctor. And by the way, a mad doctor is what psychiatrists were called back then, who is the head of care at Bedlam. Simon goes to Bedlam to meet a man who has been the star attraction in this sort of really horrible, grisly freak show because this man is said to not be able to die. Anything can be done to him. Any kind of torture can be done to him. He won't die. He could be slashed and he can be burned and he could be broken, but he can't die. So Simon wants to have an audience with this man, and for a tidy sum, the director of Bedlam agrees. And he goes into the institution, and he hears a man muttering in the corner. He sees a man. He's brought to this man in a cage, who's muttering in the corner, insane stuff. And as he draws closer, he realizes what he's saying is not insane. He's quoting Ovid in Latin. He realizes eventually, within that audience, that that man is Galen Ercildown. The story takes place in two timelines, and I've kind of given you a capsule of what happens in the Victorian timeline. So now we go to 21st century, the North Shore of Chicago. And I have to say, the story goes back and forth. It's not the Victorian, and now we're in Chicago. They go back and forth all the way throughout the story. And Galen and Simon, who have found each other and lost each other many times over and over through the years, are now in the same place by design. Simon likes to keep tabs on Galen. Galen not so much Simon, but Simon wants to keep tabs on Galen. Simon is still trying to figure out, because now he can't die. He can't join his wife. She's dead. He's alive. And now it's been almost 2 centuries since the Victorian story. And Simon is still living. So all Simon wants to do is die. There's only one problem. The book that would have the cure for the immortality is missing and has been missing since 1837. No one knows where it is, least of all Galen. So Simon wants to kind of keep tabs on Galen. They have sort of a love-hate relationship. And in the modern story, Simon hears word, he gets a line on the book, possibly. In the meantime, Galen reads in the independent newspaper, the London Independent, which he reads online every morning. He's a man of the century. He reads about a renovation at the site of the old Bedlam Hospital in London, which actually happened a couple years ago. I read about it in the newspaper. That's how I thought of it. But during the excavation in the book, not necessarily in actuality, they uncovered diaries of this mad doctor who describes in detail the torture of a particular patient who is unnamed at Bedlam during the years 1837 to 1842. Galen knows it's him. And he is, to say the least, skittish. He already suffers from terrible PTSD because of his experiences at Bedlam, even 200 years later. And he hears about this, and he is absolutely freaked out. He doesn't know what to do. His biggest fear in the world is that someone will discover that he's immortal. Which brings me to one of the key themes of the book, which is what would someone do if they had the key to immortality? As a society, what would we do? As a scientist or as a corporate executive of a big pharmaceutical company, what would you do if you had the ability to uncover the holy grail for thousands of years, the key to immortality? Could make you a lot of money. But Galen understands the consequences are great. He has lived a very long time and has seen what greed and power can do. So his biggest fear in the world is discovery. And now this has been discovered. He's never bothered to change his name. He never thought there was a reason to. He'd be in a place for 10 years. He'd move. He'd go on. He'd live his life. But now he could be discovered, really discovered. So he's very upset. And he goes to take a drive on his motorbike. Chicago, the end of March, a big snowstorm that melts very quickly but leaves us all icy, one of those great lake effect snowstorms. Well, he goes off on his motorbike and heads towards, he's now, I should explain that in the modern story, Galen is a dealer in rare books and antiquities. And Simon is living quite a nice life in Highland Park in a big mansion where he writes best-selling Holmes pastiches. He writes books about Sherlock Holmes, and as he explains in one of the chapters, Victorian mysteries written by a Victorian mystery. So Galen decides to take a drive up Sheridan Road, and because he knows a place beneath the bluff where he could sort of get some peace of mind and sort of regroup himself away from everything up in Highland Park. And he goes up along Sheridan Road, and he has hallucinations. This PTSD plagues him when something triggers it, and the discovery of the diaries completely triggered a new set of hallucinations. And he sees the knife of this mad Dr. Handley floating in front of him, about to do something to him. Slams on the brakes of his bike. It's very icy, and the bike catapults down a 150-foot bluff, which those of us who live in Chicago know they do exist. It is not a flatland. And he goes plummeting down this cliff, the bike and all. He reaches the bottom of the cliff, and people have seen it. Ambulances are called. And now the potential for discovery is really, really real.